Welcome to Decades of Horror, the classic era.
If you are indeed a magician, why do you not use your great power to slay the one-eyed monster?
This is episode 144, recorded February 5th, 2023.
Gruesome Magazine.
I hate the one-eyed monsters. I am your host, Jeff Mohr. On this podcast, we cover the good, the bad, and maybe even the ugly horror films released since the beginning of time through 1969. In each episode, we'll discuss the monster, spirits, psychos, and villains that have haunted movie-going audiences since the dawn of film history. We are also partnering with Decades of Horror. All of them are partnering with Play Now Media. And I can say now, I haven't checked it, but Michael promised me there should be 8 episodes of Decades of Horror of the 70s and 8 episodes of Decades of Horror of the 80s. I think on the Wicked Horror TV channel and the Free Horror movie channel, I think. So I've got to verify that because some of those apps they're having glitches with. So cool. The retro one is not working yet, which that's the one I'm really excited about. But anyway, yeah, we're all of Decades of Horror is partnering with them. You can get these apps on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, and other apps and sources that I could just make up. Also on mobile, tablet, and desktop. So check those out. It's a great source to get movies. And actually, you'll find out later that the movie we're doing next week is available on the Classic Horror Movie Channel. All right. With me this week are my incredible co-hosts. First up is Whitney Collazo, an accomplished artist, makeup artist, and writer. Whitney, what's shaking?
Not much.
You don't have to answer that, Whitney.
No.
There was no hidden meaning in that question.
No, I'm good. How's everything?
Good, actually. Yeah. Also with us is Chad Hunt, co-host of Decades of Horror of the 70s and 80s, and a film producer, director with Three Havoc Productions, and a comic book artist and writer. Chad, how you doing?
I'm good.
Excellent.
And that's all I'm going to say. You can't make me say anything else. It doesn't matter how long you sit there and think about it.
Also with us is Daphne, who's awesome, stupendous, and likable as hell. How are you, Daphne?
Hey, guys. I'm doing real good.
I pray each episode I sit in anticipation to make sure the lights are still up.
Aren't they soothing?
They are.
And they just bring my whole mood right, evens everything out. It's just
I'm getting
awesome.
hypnotized while I'm looking at them. Also with us is guest host Ralph Miller again. Ralph's
deep within his dungeon.
Yes.
Yes. Our special effects guru that we appreciate his input, and I know he's a big Ray Harryhausen stop motion animation fan, so
Yay.
we thought it would be fun to invite him along for this film. How are you, Ralph?
Hey, Ralph.
I'm feeling fantastic, just like this movie is fantastic. So I'm looking forward to this talk here we're going to have.
All right. That is excellent. All right. So what is our movie today? And by the way, folks, if you enjoy these podcasts or you've listened to us before, please subscribe and please comment. We really like comments. So, if you hear us say something brilliant or maybe more likely stupid, let us know. Make suggestions. Your experiences with these movies, we appreciate all of them. So
you might hear me say something brilliant, but Jeff, I don't know.
But I won't recognize it at all as being brilliant. It'll go. All right. Our movie today is The 7th Voyage of Sinbad, directed by Nathan Juran, written by Ken Kolb, credited as Kenneth Kolb and Ray Harryhausen. Cast includes Kerwin Matthews, Catherine Grant, Richard Eyre, Torrin Thatcher, Alfred Brown. Filming locations, UK is, I think, where the stop motion special effects were done. Malta for for a water tank. Spain, Mallorca, Verona Studios in Salem, Oregon.
Everybody knows that Malta is well known for their water tanks.
Yes, it is. It's a veritable treasure mine of water tanks.
It's well worth moving the whole production to Malta just for the water tanks.
Well, and I think the Verona Studios in Oregon is probably where Richard Eyre maybe shot his segments, because he did not get to go to Spain, but we'll talk about that. Production dates June 1957 to July 1958. So a lengthy time, but not all that unusual for something heavy with stop motion. Release dates. This is a little weird to me. The first release date is December 5th, 1958 in West Germany, then a week later in France, and a week later in Australia, and finally December 23rd, 1958 in the US. The budget is estimated to be $650,000. The box office, $7 million, or ultimatemovierankings.com said $9 million. And I also saw 3.2 million in rentals. So that seems like a fair factor.
They're all liars.
Between the box office and the rentals. It's possible. That's possible. Also known as Sinbad's 7th Reise. Sinbad's
That's easy for you to say.
And Sinbad y la Princesa. Ia y la. Sinbad and the Princess. So that kind of makes sense. You know, Mexico, the land of...
especially if you're from Mexico.
Yeah, it would. And the synopsis. When a princess is shrunken, when a princess is shrunken by an evil wizard, Sinbad must undertake a quest to an island of monsters to cure her and prevent a war.
Right after he shrucks a whole bunch of corn.
Yeah, he shrucked it. After he shrucked his skeleton. This skeleton figures in one of the stop motion interplays, correct? Whoops, well, how'd that happen? Let's go to...
you want me to tell them?
First impressions. No.
Okay.
Because I know. This is this is Whitney's pick. You guys can't have an E on the end of both your end of both your names.
Yeah.
Just,
remember all that smart stuff you said you might hear?
That was it.
Yeah. There you go.
All that genius talk.
That was it. Okay, so Whitney, tell us about your experience with this film and what your impressions are.
Oh man, so this is like one of the holy grail type movies that was like in the household growing up. Like my dad introduced this movie to my brother and my cousins and I don't know how many times we watched this. It's just one of those movies that we loved. But I remember the first time I watched it, I wasn't too thrilled about some of the monsters. But of course, my curiosity was like, I was still hooked in a way. I'm like, oh, I don't like this one-eyed creature, this one-eyed monster. But I really liked where some of the story, when I was trying to understand the story at the time and all these other things going on in this adventure. There's so much, and it's to appreciate watching it now as an adult, like seeing just overall this adventure that Sinbad has and just how complicated things get for the princess especially. I don't know. I just love it. I don't know how to say otherwise. There's just so much magic to this and some monsters.
Magic and monsters. What else can you ask for?
Right.
All right. Awesome. I'm so glad you picked it. You picked this once before and then for some reason changed your mind. So I'm glad we got back around to it.
Yeah.
Well, let's go with Ralph next. I'm just going to go kind of down the line. So,
Okay.
Ralph, when did you first see this? And what's your experience with
Nice
it?
shirt, by the way, Ralph.
Oh yeah, I've got some
Perfect.
Oh,
skeletons
so cool.
here.
Perfect.
Great.
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, a lot of people may have seen this on TV, or some people have seen it on video growing up, but it really didn't play in the Chicago area on TV, and so I had to wait quite a while before I saw it. I would see like little glimpses, like there was a book called Illustrated History of the Horror Film in the library. It had a picture of the Sinbad fighting the skeleton. I'm like, I've got to see this movie.
Mhm.
And I think in Famous Monsters, I would see some pictures from this movie. And I'm like, wow, I've got to see this movie. And I think that I didn't actually see it until it was re-released a year after Golden Voyage of Sinbad. So we're talking 1975 or something like that. And I was in high school, and it blew my mind. It was amazing. It was only the second time I've seen a Harryhausen film on the big screen, knowing what these films were. And yeah, I'd gotten glimpses of it, but I'd never really seen the whole movie, and that was fantastic. So I love it. Still do, always will.
Yeah. Okay. Now we go on to the other
Whitney
knee.
too.
The women who say knee. Daphne. When did you first see this?
I saw it Saturday afternoons or during the week showing during summer or something when I would watch TV a lot. So that's when I saw it, and I loved watching all of these kind of mythology stop animation movies. I think that they would sometimes play it. Maybe they were doing a Harryhausen week or something like that, or something. But yeah, it's so much fun, and it just brings back a lot of nostalgia for me for spending time watching stuff on TV and the monster movies. And then I haven't seen it for a while, so it's awesome seeing it now. And I was just really impressed with how good it looked. I love the skeletons. I love the skeleton fighting stuff. And I thought that looked so good. And I just was like, yay, when I saw them fighting. It was great. So it's been a while, so I was really happy to see it. And it makes me want to rewatch the other ones too.
That fight is impressive. Chad, how about you? When did you first see this?
I first saw this movie when nickel candy cost a penny. Actually, the very first time I saw this, I was on summer vacation as a kid, and one of my summer jobs was to babysit my younger cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie was the only thing that would get them to sit down and be quiet. and so that's the first thing I remember about it, and because they love the monsters and the Cyclops. I don't know what's it called, a Cyclops horse, I don't know, whatever it was cool, and it kept the kids quiet. So this has always been one of my favorites. I never get tired of watching it. It's the stop motion, the Harryhausen stuff. I was a big fan of Harryhausen before that, with all his the black and white movies that he did up until that point. So it was cool to see the Cyclops and the skeleton and the little homunculus and it just cool stuff. And you didn't get too many. This was what was considered kids a special effects extravaganza back in the day. This is so it was very cool, and still one of my favorite movies ever.
Yeah, it looks amazingly good, especially the. I love the color, and I'm also a big fan of that sword fight scene between Sinbad and the skeleton. It looks amazingly good, I think. And the vividness of those colors from 1958, whoever did, I was trying to figure out, but like the costume design and the production design and that stuff is just awesome.
Jeff, may I interject just a little bit here?
Yes, sir.
I just want to, I know there are some people who are screaming at the podcast right now. I just want to correct a couple of things that Chad said, if you'll forgive me.
Oh, God. Okay, I'll be right back.
Yeah. The homunculus and the one-eyed centaur, those are from Golden Voyage of Sinbad. I know somewhere there are Harryhausen geeks that are upset at this podcast. I just wanted to let people know that we understand sometimes we're human, we make mistakes. That was a different movie. That was Golden Voyage.
What you were getting at was the Cyclops with furry legs. It wasn't a
centaur
with like a satyr.
Okay, because I thought you were saying it had a horse body or something. But anyway, the homunculus is from Golden Voyage. So sorry about that. But as far as the costume design, it's interesting that they didn't actually make these costumes for the movie. They were actually made for a Rita Hayworth movie that never got made. And so there were all these costumes that they could just make use of. And I'm sure it was very inexpensive for them to just
I'm going to say
rent these costumes.
That didn't look like $650,000 budget costumes.
No, plus the locations they used. So they didn't have to like build the Baghdad castle and all that kind of thing. Even when you first see Baghdad on the screen, that was the stock footage from another movie. They didn't even create that. So they made good use of less expensive ways to do things. Anyway,
I don't mean to start an argument with Ralph.
Please do.
But I could have swore they called the little dragon thing a homunculus when they captured it and it burst into flames or disintegrated.
Okay, that is Golden Voyage of Sinbad. I'm sorry.
Please tell me I did not watch. I watched the right movie. Or I watched the wrong movie again.
Well, okay. Did you see
who was Sinbad?
These creatures?
No.
You didn't see a Cyclops and a dragon?
No.
And a two-headed giant
princess?
bird?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sure.
This is. There was an Aztec mummy movie where there was the same problem, as I recall.
Do you believe this shit?
Sorry.
Hey, Sinbad, Schmidbad, they're all the same, Jeff.
Well, let us tell you about the movie, Jeff.
Please tell me about the movie while I relax.
But first,
I bet you've seen it at some point.
I don't know what I saw anymore.
But first, it's time for
I do need a can shoved through my head. Apparently. Sorry, Ralph. I came in all cocky like I was going to say something. It just got blown out of the water.
Yeah, you gave me what for.
Okay, yeah, I'll show you. You old Ralph, you.
Well, maybe we should pause the podcast and Chad, you go watch the movie.
No, we're good. I'll muddle through here somehow. Okay, taglines.
There have been other podcast members on Gruesome Magazine that have been known to do a podcast about a movie they didn't watch. I'm not naming names. Keeping
up the tradition.
Dave Dreher.
What? No, I didn't say that. Okay.
All right. Taglines for whatever Sinbad movie this is are as follows. See, which I didn't. The sorcery of Colossus' most evil magician. See, they're just rubbing it in now. Right? The attack of the two-headed giant rock. I didn't see that either. See, the battle of the Cyclops and the dragon. See Sinbad in his breathtaking fight for survival. Okay, the second tagline. Oh my God. See! Chad, see! These incredible scenes before your unbelieving eyes. The sheer magic of Dinorama, which wasn't in the film Chad saw, now recreates the most spectacular adventure ever filmed that Chad missed.
So now, what were we talking about, Ralph? I think that that's from the re-release then?
The Dinorama is, they didn't call it Dinorama when this came out. It's in the re-release that sometimes they advertised it as Dinorama, but Dynamation was what Harryhausen called this technique for this movie.
What you watched was Dinorama, Chad.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Now I'm really confused. Which one?
It's
Out
just-
of the Age of Wonders. Let me get through this, Jeff, please.
Do it.
One of the most wonderful motion pictures of our time that Chad didn't watch.
Oh, they're making you feel really bad.
They are. Adventure of the Ages for all ages except Chad in Dynamation. The eighth wonder of the screen, but Chad watched the seventh wonder of the screen, which was the Golden Voyage of Sinbad. Okay. That's it for taglines.
Anything for a laugh, this guy. Anything for
I'll even watch the wrong movie as long as it gets a laugh. I tell you.
And that's been Taglines with Chad.
That's me.
Okay. We walked right into that.
Yeah, that's me.
So let's look at some posters and such here. Well, before we get going, I read somewhere, maybe you guys could talk about this, that this was kind of where Harryhausen made a turn from the science fiction monsters to more like, I don't know, heroic fantasy adventures.
fantasy?
Am I right about that? Or
Could be.
Sure.
Yes,
Well-
that's definitely true. Yeah, he'd done, well, Earth versus the Flying Saucers. He'd done the Giant Behemoth. No, not Giant Behemoth. Now people are yelling at me. No, he did Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and 20 Million Miles to Earth with the giant Venusian monster. So he'd done some really classic 50s sci-fi kind of movies.
It Came from Beneath the Sea is the one you were thinking of.
It
Right?
came from beneath the sea, right? The giant octopus. Well, Giant Behemoth was a movie, but it was something Willis O'Brien worked on after Giant Behemoth. So, I mean, after after the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. But yes, this was his first color movie, his first like fantasy adventure movie, and it. Not only did all of us here, except for Chad, enjoy this movie, but
I'm sure I would have
really-
liked it.
you should really watch it, Chad. I think you'll like it.
Oh, well.
Anyway, there were many people I was too young to have seen this when it came out, but there are many people who saw this when they were growing up, and it blew their minds. And many people, I'm talking about not just general audience, but people who went on to become directors of movies and special effects creators, people like Rick Baker and Dennis Muren and Phil Tippett and John Berg and filmmakers like
Jim Pearl.
Yeah, Jim Pearl, another stop motion person. You had,
I know Sam Raimi talks about it when in
Sam
the
Raimi.
commentary of Army of Darkness.
Yeah, Army of Darkness definitely
yeah.
borrowed
Yeah.
from this,
Mhm.
the fighting skeleton idea. And we can get to that, but there are other movies that definitely borrowed from that concept, just the things that he brought into this movie. It's like nobody had seen a movie like this. There had been movies that were based on the Arabian Nights, like there was a Max Fleischer movie with Sinbad and Popeye, and that actually was something that Harryhausen had seen when he was young, and that left an impression on him.
That's a great cartoon.
Great little cartoon.
And Sinbad has a great little theme song that I'm not going to sing.
And but John Landis, just all these people, George Lucas, all these people were very inspired by Harryhausen, and many of them were inspired by this film specifically when they were very young, seeing it on the big screen. It just blew their minds to see this in color, to see all these fantastic creatures. There'd never been a film quite like it. You'd had The Thief of Baghdad, the silent movie, and the Alexander Korda movie, but they didn't really have creatures like this. It wasn't magic on this level. So it really, even if nothing else, this was a hugely influential movie on many people who went on to create many spectacles for the screen. Yeah, in their careers.
So Bluto's theme song as Sinbad was, "Who's the most remarkable, extraordinary fellow?" Sinbad the sailor. He had no ego problem whatsoever. Okay, well, let's check out the many posters. It might take us the rest of the day to get through the posters. So
who are all these people?
Yeah,
the animation. Yeah. But we have the little, like the title is in sort of the shape of the
smoke from the
Genie's lamp. Yeah.
The magic lamp.
Mhm.
genie coming out of the lamp. And we have the genie down in the bottom right.
Mm-hmm.
Not every one of these. Seventh Voyage, and now this one's Dinorama, so
Right, so that's a re-release.
And here's the C taglines. See the incredible scene. See. And we have the Cyclops with the rock up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
If only I'd seen the poster before I tried to watch a movie. They would have directed me right to it. See.
And there's the eighth wonder of the screen. A little more colorful. And a, like lobby card type thing. Out of the Age of Wonder.
It's the Dynamation.
They just are crowded with creatures. And,
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure you see everything that you're going to see. That's how these
Well,
thing is.
they had so many different stories, and I think I was reading in your notes about how it's kind of as a serial or cut for a serial, started out as a serial or something, but you could definitely see how it could be shown as a serial with each. Every time he goes out and fights somebody.
Yeah. Now this actually, it was a hard sell for Harryhausen to get this movie made. He went to all these studios, and like RKO a few years before this was made had put out a movie called Son of Sinbad, and it was a lousy movie, and I think it was RKO put it out, and it didn't make any money. And because that one movie didn't make money, all these producers at the studios were like, nobody wants to see a costume picture. Nobody wants to see Arabian Nights. That's silly. Never makes money.
like they used to make, right?
Yeah. So
You can't make those silly things.
But his buddy, his producer of many films, Charles H. Sneer,
Yes.
saw these ideas that he would do these renderings, these big charcoal renderings to show key scenes from the movie. And he showed them to Charles Sneer, and he was like, maybe we can make this work. This might be an interesting movie, So they did it and pulled it off. And I think he had just written like a 3-page story, and the screenwriters took it from there.
Right.
I just got a notification on my phone from Tubi, and it says, since you enjoyed the Golden Voyage of Sinbad, maybe you'd enjoy the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Thanks, Tubi. I'm sorry.
I bet you've seen it before at some point.
I have.
Yeah.
I've seen.
I'm sure you'll recognize
all
when we
of
get
them.
into the
Yeah.
actual.
When you
I've
see the
seen,
cool monsters.
Golden is the one I've seen the most of.
Mhm.
So here's Italian, I believe. Il 7TH Sinbad. I like the depiction of the Cyclops there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little weird.
Mhm.
This is actually my favorite. This is the Japanese poster, which resembles.
Oh, I love it.
Ah, look at that.
All right.
Kaiju.
Yep.
Yeah,
kaiju
I love
poster.
it.
But notice how there's a big kaiju, and then
Mhm.
there's a. Maybe it was. I think it's this one, isn't there? There's a little Cyclops.
Yeah,
too.
there's a little Cyclops there, and, and the dragon
mini
is
me,
much
a
smaller.
mini me Cyclops.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And and he's green, the Cyclops in the big
That's
picture.
so.
there.
That's great.
And these are just sort of trips down memory lane. That's the 8mm
Oh yeah,
envelope.
Wow.
I did get a couple of those. Yeah, some of those little clips. They'd be like 8 minutes long or something.
Yeah. I used to have
And-
those too.
The bottom one is the laser disc.
Ah,
Ooh.
that looks awesome.
That does.
Yeah, I don't know. I like historical stuff like that. Sorry. Scrape, scrunch, clobber. Okay. So the director, I just wanted to run this past you guys. I would have sworn, I recognize his name. I would have sworn we had done movies that he has done, but we haven't. They're just movies I know what we're going to do. So Nathan Juran, Black Castle, The Deadly Mantis, which is really a horrible movie, but we have to do it sometime.
Hey, it's got
I
a
like
big
it.
bug.
Well, that's it. The flying is very realistic too. The flying scenes.
Oh yeah,
20 Million Miles to Earth, which is one of my favorites,
Harryhausen.
and I have not seen The Brain. From
Oh,
Planet
it's
Argos.
classic.
I have to watch it just from that poster. And
Yeah,
our buddy
He's
absolutely.
John
possessed
Agar.
by this giant floating brain. It's
I
amazing.
always wondered,
Yeah,
like,
right.
when I'd see ads for this movie and why this kid is smiling.
Yeah. Well, it's evil glee, don't you know?
Yeah.
It's a-
Scary, creepy kid.
That's John
Yeah.
Agar.
yeah. Yep.
Agar!
Attack of the
Oh, the
50-foot
50-foot woman. Yes.
Jack the Giant Killer.
Yeah, which is
Oh.
notoriously a ripoff of this movie.
First Man in the Moon, and finally The Boy Who Cried Werewolf.
Okay, I'm putting all
And I
these on my
believe,
list.
well, Jack the Giant Killer and The Boy Who Cried Werewolf, I think both have Kerwin
Erwin
Matthews.
Matthews. Yes, they
Yeah.
do. and Jack the Giant Killer also has Torrin Thatcher as the villain.
Yes.
Wow.
I believe it's fairly obvious Nathan Juran had favorites because First Man on the Moon is also Harryhausen did work on that as well, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And we got to do that sometime just to round out our H.G. Wells canon. We've done almost all.
Yeah, Ray Harryhausen said that Nathan Juran was a good director for him to work with because Nathan Juran had been a production designer. So he understood how movies are made and how sometimes, you have to use a little special effects and hocus pocus to make things happen. Harryhausen said one director tried to get him fired because he felt like Harryhausen was telling him what to do and he didn't think that was his place. But with a movie like this, you have to have the camera set up just right, or you're not going to get the shots. You have to leave room for this monster that's going to be added later, or
imagine
you're not going to get the shots.
Yeah, imagine the coordination it took between for that skeleton Sinbad sword fight.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
I guess can't.
Yeah.
It's very cool. So anything from about the direction? I mean, this guy was like he found a niche there for about a decade doing these monster slash creature movies, I guess, special effects.
Yeah, a lot of genre pictures, really amazing. quite a bunch of pictures there.
There was nothing that I could think of off the top of my head, but I did like that it moved really smoothly. Like I wasn't even thinking. I was just in this story with all these crazy monsters and stop motion animation, even after so long. So it's just I liked how all the stories just kind of went very smoothly along together, and yeah, I think maybe just getting sucked into the story, I would credit him for that. He did a good job with all of that stuff.
Yeah, and it was shot mostly in Spain, so you had all the minor characters were played by locals, and so I'm sure many of them didn't speak English, or English was their second language at best, and so that can complicate matters a little bit. This was also the first time that Harryhausen and his producer Charles Schneer had established that they were going to be making films in Europe. 20 Million Miles to Earth was shot in Italy, but Harryhausen had his studio and everything set up in Europe for the special effects he was doing. So from here on, all these films were set in Europe somewhere,
right.
Which enabled them to show people scenery that they hadn't seen in movies before. Because if you're stationed in California, people are going to notice that you're using the same locations that everybody else has been using.
That's another thing I made me think of when I watched it this time, and that I thought was so cool was seeing all these things. And then when I read that what some of these, like that was Alhambra that if I'm pronouncing that correctly, that they filmed at, and a real place, I just kind of assumed that, I guess I didn't even think about it, but I just kind of assumed that they were all sets or something. But no, this is like the real thing, which is super cool.
Yeah, great production value that way. Yes. And probably, I think Harryhausen said, you can't shoot in Alhambra now, because some other movie makers had like damaged a wall or something when they were making a movie. Of course, Harryhausen himself, when they made 20 Million Miles to Earth, I mean, not he personally, but when that movie was made, they have the Colosseum at the very end of the movie, and they have these tanks, running around driving around the Colosseum, and they tore up the cobblestones surrounding the Colosseum. So they probably ruined it for any future filmmakers who wanted to film there. These days we live in a time when if you go to Stonehenge, it's all fenced off. You can't even get close to some of these things. It's remarkable that they were able to film right in that place, and they had these costumes from another movie, so they didn't have to make the costumes. They really got bang for the buck. It looks like a much bigger budget movie than it was.
It does. It really does. So let's take a look at the leads, just see if Chad recognizes anybody. Kerwin Matthews as Sinbad.
Yeah.
Catherine Grant as the princess, and Torrin Thatcher as the evil magician.
So evil.
Yeah.
And so what do we Kerwin Matthews is well, I'll talk about him in a minute, because I got a slide of something he's in. We've done another one of his movies. But Catherine Grant, you guys know where Catherine Grant ended up?
I know who she married. That's where she's going. She ended up marrying Bing Crosby.
Oh, wow.
And that was right about now. But that picture of her, I literally expect her to like twirl around and start singing "The Hills Are Alive."
Oh,
She has this. Anyway.
no, very much appreciate her performance now just as much as I did when I was a kid. I mean, she's so charming, and she, despite, the frustration and having to have been shrunken down and taken advantage by and being played with the whole sorcerer, and she wanted was to be with Sinbad and be married and have their life, but the thing is, there was so much that he went through just to have her. Like he established so much just to try to get this thing lifted off of her when that sorcerer shrunk her. So, and when you really think about it as an adult, like, oh, he really did try. He really went all out for that. So it's, as an adult, I'm like, wow, it's kind of a love story. I didn't look at it that much as a kid. So
she was a beautiful princess. I mean,
yes.
she was a perfect sweetheart, innocent, true blue fairy tale princess.
Mm-hmm.
Now, through modern eyes, people are going to look at Kerwin and Catherine and say, they don't necessarily look like they came from the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
But this was 1958.
Well, they did say praise Allah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's right.
It was in the dialogue. It was in the outfits. It was in the locale. But, these days, they might be a little... They might choose differently with the casting.
And they said Allah in the movie I watched too.
Mm.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, they did. I remember that.
Another thing I liked about the princess is how she was totally game. Like she jumped on top of the cage and was like helping free them. And she was like, yeah, I'll go on this trip with you. And, she was totally into it.
I mean, even to the point to where she went through the bottle, the genie's lamp. I mean, like she did it all just to try to meet their goal to see to it that this thing would be lifted off of her and she would reach her height again. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, she did what she could for a little lady.
Yes, absolutely.
Literally.
So I was gonna say she really didn't do any other genre stuff, but I thought 1001 Arabian Nights, which she did the voice of a princess, but this was a Mr. Magoo film.
Right.
Mr. Magoo's ancestor, Abdul Aziz Magoo,
Wow.
is Aladdin's uncle. And Dwayne Hickman, Dobie Gillis, is the voice of Aladdin. Hans Conried. Man, this is a bunch of people. Herschel Bernardi. Anyway. So yeah, and she quit acting for a while. She did a bunch of stuff in the 50s and then the 60s. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 credits on television episodes. A couple credits in the 70s. Anyway,
I can't not see her singing The Sound of Music right now.
I shouldn't have said that.
No, I'm glad you did.
Her voice and her face just had this this sweet joy, like I expected it to burst forth.
Yeah. Well, in that scene, she was just reunited with Sinbad and just got back from their voyage, and she was about to meet the Caliph of Baghdad, and prepare for their wedding, that kind of thing. So she had a lot to smile about.
Now, Torrin, I know we've done a movie with Torrin Thatcher. I'm trying to remember.
Well, he's awesome in this one.
Yes. Oh, is he evil or what?
Yeah. He's got amazing magical powers, even without the lamp.
And he always, once they call him on it, then he always does his little
yes, with his hands.
Yeah.
Like, what he's thinking is, I'll get you later.
Yeah.
His face was so expressive.
It's hard to maybe hard to recognize him from there.
Well, one thing that's kind of interesting is that I understand at the beginning of the film, when they were filming, he didn't want them to shave his head, so they had to use
Oh.
bald caps on him. And after a certain point, he got tired of having to come in early to makeup before everybody else. So he had his head shaved, and for the rest of the movie it's shaved. But I've looked at the movie and I can't tell what scenes he's wearing a bald cap on. They did a good job in those days.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I wouldn't even have noticed.
Yeah.
So he was in The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from 1968, the television production with Jack Palance.
Oh, really?
Okay.
He plays the doctor or scientist that's in the demonstrations that makes fun of him.
Oh, okay.
No, he was really good in this movie. The character, and I love the character. So, like we kind of said, kind of pandering and kind of knowing what to say, kind of political.
Yes.
But so just like, ew, creepy. When he was like watching the princess and kind of started going in there, I was like, what is he gonna do? I wasn't expecting what he did, but you knew he was up to no good. Just for his own gains to get back to that little island.
Yes.
Yeah, he's got 154 credits in IMDb and ranges pretty much all over the place. TV, westerns, mysteries, adventures, Alfred Hitchcock TV series, thriller, Jack the Giant Killer, which we did mention.
He was Pendragon, also a sorcerer. Yeah.
He was typecast, huh?
Well, for that one anyway.
Yeah. Wow, Time Tunnel, Star Trek.
He has perfect bad magician eyebrows.
Yes, he does.
Night Gallery. Yeah,
I
he is.
mean-
He is.
Just, when Sinbad and the men, they're coming up to the shore, and then you see him running away from the Cyclops, and that just shows that curiosity that, I didn't question too much when I first watched it as a kid. I'm like, the first time watching it, I thought, okay, this guy's getting away from this monster, because anyone would run away from a monster. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh, so now I figured, knowing, rewatching that, like, oh, so he must have done something, just seeing how he goes back and forth and he picks what he wants to do to these individuals. Like, what did he do to this thing to
Exactly.
pee off, and then running away, and then saying that he, convincing Sinbad to let him go with him and all of that. I don't know.
Well, I figured that the Cyclops was just mad because he stole his lamp. I figured that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it belonged to Kura the magician to begin with, but once, we know that the Cyclops hoards all these treasures.
That's true.
It could be the Cyclops had snatched it from Kura, but then the Cyclops wanted it back. When Kura was running off with it.
So how about Kerwin Matthews as Sinbad? We've had several Sinbads. Is he a good Sinbad?
I thought he was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From what I remember, I thought he was great.
It's been a while since I've seen the other one, so I can't off the top of my head like pick someone, but I thought he did really good in it. He was he was the whole package, I guess.
Well, he's definitely a handsome devil, and he does the adventure scenes, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, he's the stalwart, handsome, dashing hero
Yes.
that you would expect from this time period.
He was also. Go ahead.
In the later films, The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, you had John Philip Law, who
him I remember.
He had a full beard and a turban all the time, And then you had then you had Patrick Wayne in Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, the third of the Harryhausen Sinbad movies. Patrick Wayne was the son of John Wayne.
Oh
Yes, he was.
Yeah. But I think Harryhausen said that he really appreciated that Kerwin Matthews really was good at getting the eye lines and really focusing. So it really looked like he was looking at that Cyclops or, looking at.
Well, and he worked with him where he did
the skeleton.
He was in the Three Worlds of Gulliver.
Mm-hmm.
And we already mentioned Jack the Giant Killer, but he was also in a couple of Hammer films.
Oh, wow.
He was also Dr. Rick Torres from Octavan. Unless I watched the wrong Octavan.
This guy?
Yes, that's him. That's it.
Wow.
With Pierre Angeli, I just had to, I just wanted the picture for Kerwin Matthews, but I couldn't stop with that. We had to see some Octaman.
Yeah, Rick Baker
Very
created
cool.
Octaman.
Yes.
I could see him as Sinbad, as an older Sinbad right there. I could
could.
totally see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, he is like, this, or the safari adventure movie kind of thing, Jungle Jim or something.
I appreciate that you made that comment about Harryhausen appreciating that he could do the eye lines, because after we did Guanji and talked about just really all the work that went into just making it all work together so well, it really made me appreciate how things like that are really important. And you get so sucked into the story and go along with it. If it would be really easy for it to be just, so distracting if, or you would just laugh at it more than you would probably enjoy it. If all that stuff was done poorly. So,
yeah. So on the set, they would just have a big pole that had an eye at the top of it. And they'd practice with that pole so they knew where they were supposed to be looking. And then I think when they actually did the takes, they wouldn't have the pole in the scene, but the actors would have to remember where their eyes were supposed to be looking.
Yeah, that's
Well,
really
I've got one more actor to look at here.
Aha.
Richard Eyre.
Richard Eyre.
Plays the genie. And if you watch movies around that time, he's a recognizable child actor that didn't get to go to Spain.
No.
So if you watch it, I didn't pay much attention the first time, but as I was trying to watch through the second time, it was whenever there's a scene with anybody else in it other than Catherine Grant, you do not see his face.
Yeah, on location, you see the back of him.
Yeah, they had I don't know if he was a Spanish boy or from the local area where it was shot, or even just a part of him. You see like his legs and somebody behind him. So then she went and shot these scenes with him later.
Yeah, at the studio. Yeah, and Harryhausen, in fact, had never met him until he was all grown up years later in a convention.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Richard Eyre, some people know him also from a movie called The Invisible Boy, which had an appearance with Robbie the Robot. I've never actually seen that movie, but he was the Invisible Boy.
Yeah. And before I forget, I was going to mention these Hammer films that Kerwin Matthews was in. Maniac from 1963 with a Sangster script, and Michael Carreras directed, and Pirates of Blood River, which fits, right?
Sure.
Swashbuckler character. And there might be more Hammer films that he's in. Those I recognize. All right, well, let's get to some of the effects.
Yay.
Here's our mini princess.
Yeah.
Love it.
So they had to make a pillow that was 40 feet wide.
That's
30
just
feet
so
high.
cool.
Yeah, it is.
And it's one of the simpler effects in a way, because it's just a static mat, just that outline of the pillow. They didn't, wasn't moving around or anything. She was moving within the pillow.
And I couldn't find a good shot of her trying to unlatch that cage because I thought that was pretty cool too. That
Well,
was,
that bottom shot is where she's on the way to unlatch. the
right,
cage.
right.
Oh, that's
He's
right,
lifting
yeah.
her up there. But I was a little irritated that you know, when people shrink and their vocal cords get shorter, their voice. And she just sounded exactly the same.
You wanted her to sound like the white-headed fly at the end of the movie. The
Yes,
Fly.
yes.
Right, yeah.
Where is my daughter? Father.
Is he truly my father? 10,000 devils.
Is it hard? I guess I'm having a hard time imagining the pillow,
Yeah.
the pillow scene. But so, is it hard to do the shadows, or is it just, you know, you can make a shadow no problem in a situation like that? I'm just looking at this picture, and it made me think, you know,
It would
the
still be
shadow's an
lit.
issue.
The where they're shooting her, it would still be lit to match the.
Okay, because of the mat, the light source would just send it on the. Okay.
Yeah, you just have to be careful when you light both scenes that it looks like they have the same source light. You know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the whole
I'm
thing.
glad
We
to
had to get-
contribute to this movie. And
Thank you,
We-
Chad.
Thank you, Chad.
Well,
You're
Chad, just
welcome.
so you know,
Jump
The,
in anytime.
Torrin Thatcher has the lamp with the genie in it,
Mhm.
and but the Cyclops steals the lamp, and now after Torrin Thatcher's character shrinks the princess, then he convinces them they have to go get the lamp in order to restore her. I think, or is
Yep.
Yeah.
so.
Yep. He shrinks her and then acts like he knows how to do it, but you have to go back to this island and we have to
Mhm.
do it there. So she has to come with us.
He
Little
was just
sneak.
a little.
I
snake.
know.
Yeah. He really like just like cause trouble and just make things so hard for Sinbad.
So I just threw these on here because those are the two leaders of the kingdoms that the marriage between Sinbad and the princess are supposed to bring about peace.
Mhm.
Right, between Baghdad and Chandra. Yes.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the magician is sowing discord here in order to get his way.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When Parissa's father sees that she's been shrunk down, he says to the Caliph, "Look upon your city, enjoy the sight, for soon it will be rubble and bleached bones." Kind of harsh.
Yeah.
Little.
Not the Caliph's fault.
It wasn't me. I know.
Well, but he's saying this to the guy who told the magician that he was, if he was still in town by midnight or by dark,
Yeah.
his eyes would be ripped out and he would never see.
That's right. Yeah.
So in the middle, I just threw this into because this guy, Harufa,
Harufa.
I kind of liked him. Poor Harufa
Yeah.
got bashed
Yes.
around quite a bit.
Yes, he did.
And I think that's that the Cyclops had on the spit, I think.
Yes.
I think you're right. Yeah.
That's him.
The side, he just was getting into all sorts of trouble.
Try to help me remember that because I'm just kind of like, I'm just not picturing Cyclops worrying about how their food's prepared.
Oh, you mean
Oh, I
in the,
loved the whole
in
spit
the original text? You mean?
Well, why he's tied to that thing.
Well, he must taste better.
Yeah.
I usually
Well,
eat these
eat.
raw.
Everything's
Uh-huh.
better on a stick. You know?
Yeah.
It's like,
Charbroiled over there.
Yeah. Do some
all right.
grilling.
Here we go, Chad. Here's
Oh,
the
nice.
Cyclops that we were talking about.
Yeah, I know now.
He has furry legs, and there's a
Yeah.
reason they did
Cloven
that. It had-
hooves.
they didn't want him to be look too human-like or something. Is that the?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the
Harryhausen
goat's
wanted
legs,
to be
yeah.
clear. It wasn't just a man in a costume. It certainly isn't.
We're doing stop motion here. This is not a guy in a costume.
Yeah.
There he is holding. That might be Sinbad because he throws Sinbad into that
Yeah.
cage, doesn't he? Yeah.
He does.
It was cool though.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah.
Catches a couple spears too, right in the chest.
Mhm.
Oh,
One in the chest, one in the stomach.
yeah.
And it was it close to this scene like when in some of the crates you see skeletons, right?
Mhm.
And it almost
Yeah.
makes you think about something happening with them, and but it doesn't, you don't see that here. You see it later with the fight with the skeleton. It's almost like it kind of gives you an idea
Mhm.
of what's to come with it later. That's how I took it.
Yep.
Well, and I ran into this a little bit with when we did Guanji and trying to find good pictures, because what happens is a lot of times if the creatures are in good focus,
Mm.
the others, the landscape or even the sky will be real grainy.
Mhm.
It's hard to, and this happens in this as well in the ones that look like they're like outdoors. I mean, I think they look fine here, but if you tried to enlarge that picture, it would.
Something I always enjoyed with watching stuff when I was a kid, and specifically in stuff like this, where there's like this giant monster or this giant, I like when you're a kid, I always would think about like my position in world or something. So like I would imagine like what my and everything just was tainted with being a kid. So it's like, and everything was small. So
Mhm.
I'm not doing a very good job explaining this, but so like I really liked seeing like, okay, so how would that cage be?
Mhm.
Something about the size differences. I think as an adult looking back at it, I can see that something about the size differences and kind of seeing smaller things up against bigger things was really, I don't know, kind of part of building the fantasy for me, maybe, or something. I don't know, but building the worlds. But I love looking at like that cage that was there, or even the spit in relationship to this giant monster. I think it just kind of, maybe as a kid, made me feel even like touch something in me as a small person, I don't know. I'm not,
Yeah.
but
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that touches on how that made me feel when I was little, and I'm seeing this Cyclops creature, and then he's taking them, putting them in the
Mhm.
crate in that cage, and it makes you, like you say, you think about the things like that, because you're like, oh, I feel so small in the world, and what if
Right.
there really is this big thing,
Right. Or you can relate because you are small. So someone
in
could
the
pick you
world,
up
yeah.
and stick you somewhere
Mhm.
without your wanting to. You could be
Right.
that squiggly little doll that's in
Yeah.
his hands or whatever.
Yeah, no, I feel that, definitely.
That's one of the cool things about stop motion. We've talked about it before, how we're fans of stop motion. I know how it's done and everything, but I don't know all the ins and outs of it. But
Mm-hmm.
there's something about it that you just buy into it. That's so, and I don't know what that is. I don't know what it is. It's not real, but at the same time, it's scary because
Mhm.
there's just something about
Mhm.
stop motion, and I think that's why it worked. That still to this day works
Mhm.
a lot better sometimes than CGI and that kind of thing. So there's just something about and I can't explain what that is. I just know it's cool.
Mhm. It's
Yeah.
like it gets to something about, I don't know, like letting go of the disbelief or whatever, because it's all crazy. You can't believe any
Yeah.
of this, but so you
Right.
just kind of go into it, and your mind can just take over from there. And
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. It's I can't put my finger on it either. Even like what I was saying about being a kid, but there's something about it that I feel like it really pushes those buttons,
Yeah, it's almost a
that I'm just
primal.
reacting to. Yeah.
It touches something in your brain that
Mhm.
triggers that fight or flight
Right.
response. And it's
Right.
just very
Mhm.
cool.
It's
Yeah,
like,
I love seeing these films on the big screen when
Oh
possible.
wow, I bet. Yeah.
A giant monster on a giant screen
Mhm.
is so impressive.
Mhm.
Stop motion is fascinating, and even people who say don't really promote it anymore, like say Dennis Muren at ILM, uses more advanced techniques these days, but he still was always mystified and loved the look of stop motion, even if it's not something that's in vogue these days for this kind of a movie.
Mhm.
It's You're looking at these creatures, and they are physical, real creatures, so they do have this look about them, if they're well crafted, like in this movie, that they do have that very real look to them. But they also have this sort of unreality because of the stop motion aspect. There isn't that blur of motion like they worked on for Dragon Slayer with Go Motion, where there's during any given frame, the figure is completely motionless, so there is no blurring of the action as there would be in something like You or Me that is live, that does move, or with computer graphics they're going to put that blur in so that it looks like it's really moving. So you've got that aspect, and this is the first film where you really got very close interaction between the stop motion figures and the people, with that sword fight at the end. That was the first time that people had ever seen anything quite like that. There are some rather close interactions in King Kong or Mighty Joe Young, but this one really pushed that, where you really got the sense that these things are somehow interacting, even though in your mind there may be something that tells you it's a little bit off, a little bit fantasy. Somehow there's these live people who are interacting with this fantastic creature that is impossible. So
still has that tactile feel to it, even though
yeah. So it's something that has captivated a lot of people.
Well, I always kind of like too in I think it's even like in King Kong, I think some people looked at it as a fault, but I thought it was cool that when you're repositioning Kong, you're slightly moving the fur, right? I thought that was cool because it looked real. People, maybe the wind was blowing or when he's moving his head. I don't know. I like that.
Well, if you watch like a real gorilla, the fur moves as the gorilla moves up underneath the muscle and everything. So it probably wasn't meant to look like that, but that's what I always thought when I was watching it. Like, wow, that's cool. They're even making the muscles move underneath the skin. How did they do that? As a kid, but I always liked that too.
We have some other creations.
There we go.
Fire-breathing dragon and the two-headed rock.
Yeah.
And the
I
don't know.
Lady, yeah.
In most circumstances, I would have called her the lady in waiting for the princess, but she did not fit the usual.
Yeah, let's see.
Stereotype of that. So she's, he turns her into this snake creature with 4 arms. And
I love that too. I love that one too so much.
The arms are cool. The arms are like tentacles with hands on the end because they didn't have joints. There was no elbow or anything. They just
definitely snake-like hands. That's always been a favorite scene of mine. I mean, and it was just so much of something that could make someone's skin crawl, but I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah,
totally.
And then she starts to choke herself with her own tail.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and I love the story around it too, and how the wizard was like, she was in there, and then he snuck a snake in there, and so it was just like, oh my god, this guy is really bad. He's doing all these things.
And I love the dialogue. The princess's father. The princess says, "A serpent, she will be killed," and then her father says, "Allah have mercy on them, both."
Both, yes.
Yeah, he makes
that woman who is turned into this snake woman is not the most pleasant personality.
No, because her father does. The princess's father says something like, "Maybe this magician can give her a more pleasant disposition," or something.
That's right.
Oh yeah, that's right. If he can
Yes.
turn her into a contented woman, he is indeed a great
Yes.
magician.
And the princess just goes, "Father."
Stop.
Papa. Yeah. That bottom creature, that serpent woman is the most fascinating and original thing. I'm sure there's nothing quite like that in any of the Arabian Nights stories. And while we're on the subject of Arabian Nights, it's kind of interesting that, the idea is that Scheherazade was telling a story night after night for 1,001 nights, so that she wouldn't be killed by, was it the Caliph or someone who she'd been, betrothed to or something, because he always was in the habit of killing a woman the night after they get together. But anyway, so the stories, there were many
they
of
called
these,
it back then.
Yeah, there were many of these stories, and it turns out that they're not all from the Middle East, that because these traveled all around the world, storytellers would sometimes add stories in so that there's like no one single book that has all these stories from an original source, that they actually traveled around the world, and like people in France and other places in Europe would add their own stories so that it became kind of a universal collection of stories that just kept growing. So it's interesting. And Harryhausen has said that with stories like this, and the same is true of the Greek mythology, you can't really take the story directly because it's just not going to work for modern audiences. So like with the story of Medusa, Perseus holds up the head of Medusa to the whole city of Jaffa or wherever it was, where Andromeda is being held captive and she's going to be killed by the monster. He's so pissed off at everybody, he holds this Medusa head and turns the entire city of people to stone. To have a hero do that at the end of a story might make you think he's not so much of a hero. And in the Sinbad stories, there's one story where Sinbad falls down a chasm into a cave, and he's starving. So when other people fall victim to this, he cannibalizes them. He eats these other people to survive. So, and I think also in many of the stories, he's something of a thief. So there are these things that were in some of these original stories that don't really work with our concept of what it means to be a hero. So liberties are taken, and also they often had a very episodic nature. It's like this happens and that happens and that happens, and in a movie you have to tie it all together. It has to be a story that has a beginning, middle, and end, and all makes sense together. And I think they did a nice job of it in this movie. So,
well, we also have some battles here.
Whoa!
Yes.
We have the Cyclops battling the dragon, and there's a fairly stationary shot of the skeleton and Sinbad facing off.
Yeah.
I remember feeling so bad for the dragon.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
He fights off that Cyclops. He wins the battle, and what happens? An arrow through the chest. Come on, people.
Well, and just that, how he was like tied really tight on that chain to guard
He's like a big guard dog.
Yeah.
Oh shoot, I didn't get a picture of that either. They had that giant crossbow that they made with the.
Yeah.
All right.
So many cool ideas.
All this stuff is very, very cool. I don't know what else to say about it. We've talked about that. The battles. I live for the battles. We all live for the battles. When I was growing up, I did not see these movies at the theater, although I could have. My neighbors, there was two boys, one a year older than me, one a year younger than me. Their dad always took them to these movies, and also stuff like Spartacus and Hercules and things. And I was like dying because they would never ask me to go with them. And I'd be, I wish that was really cool. I wish I could have gone, and that just never came back around. My dad would have killed me if I'd have asked him if I could go.
Oh,
Can I go with you? But anyway, they saw all of this stuff. I never saw any of it. And they were always coming back, and then they would recount the stories to me. It was which
Here's
I
all the good
loved.
stuff you missed.
I loved, but I was very jealous.
Jeff was 52 at the time.
Yeah. Well,
That's why no one asked. That's why no one thought to ask it. Well, he's watering his lawn.
it's a little. A little weird. This old guy wants to go with the kids. To the movie. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, one thing that some people don't notice is that this Cyclops model is different from the one that you see at the beginning of the film. This
right,
one
I
is
did
a
notice
two-horn Cyclops to differentiate it from the other one. And this one was a smaller model than the other one that you see earlier in the film. This was a smaller model, so it would be a reasonable size to fight with the dragon.
The other one was two-horned, is what you're saying?
No, this one was two-horned.
Where's the two horns?
Well, they're there. It's just kind of hard to see. It's got two horns.
Is it like a rhinoceros kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, well, you know, it's this. The smaller horn is behind the bigger horn. So
Oh, okay.
not so easy to see, but it's there if you watch the movie. And this is the one that used armature parts from the Emer from 20 million miles to Earth.
Oh, okay.
But the other one was all original parts. So, yeah, Harryhausen did have to sacrifice the original Emer model so that this one could have the parts, and you know, then he used some of these parts for another model. You know, this is the kind of thing he would have to do just to make things more affordable. You know, he was working for a producer who always had his eye on the budget, and so you know, recycling armature parts is one way of doing that. But for the later models and that are from the later films, do survive. And in fact, the Emer does exist in that they made castings out of the mold for the Emer so that you can still see what the Emer looked like, even though it's not the original piece. And there's a Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation that actually is involved in seeing that all these models that survive are preserved, because foam rubber like these things were made out of just really rots away, with the exception of the skeletons, because those were made of cotton and latex built up directly on the armature. It's a much stronger and more durable material. So anyhow, these things are kept and archived, and Harryhausen kept you know, all the scripts and illustrations he made and everything. So there are like 30,000 items in their collection that they keep. They had it on display, and a lot of this stuff on display in Scotland, and who knows, maybe some of these models will come around the United States at some point. We'll get a chance to see.
Well, that'd
them.
be cool if they had a travel display or something.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we're running late on time. Any comments anybody want to make before we move on? We do have a little bit of feedback.
This sounds like an awesome movie.
It really is.
You might want to check it out.
You should watch it.
I will. Tubi wants
I'm going to start calling you, Chad. The movie is.
Yeah, you should let him know, Jeff. Come on, it's mean of you not to tell him what the movie is.
I almost watched Sinbad the Comedian. I had no idea what I was doing.
Oh, gosh.
So anyway, one book that was very important to me, the Film Fantasy Scrapbook, was the first source that I had for seeing all the things that Harryhausen had done. And that was, again, in the 1970s that I got that book. Okay. But nowadays, there are many books about Ray Harryhausen. And if you get just one book, Harryhausen Animated Life is a pretty good overview of all the things he's done. They have all these nice big coffee table books, some of them very expensive. But also, 7th Voyage of Sinbad, the 50th anniversary edition of the video, has some really great extras to it. You know, several features about Harryhausen and the things he does, and a commentary track with Ray Harryhausen, Phil Tippett, and a couple of other people. And they also talk about the soundtrack a lot by Bernard Herrmann. Herrmann,
we didn't even talk about that.
We didn't mention that, but the music is amazing.
Yes.
It's remarkable music.
Bernard Herrmann that goes on to do the score to Psycho 2 years later.
Yeah, he did a number of Hitchcock scores, and he did a number of the Ray Harryhausen movies too. Yeah.
Which version of the DVD or Blu-ray was
Oh,
that one?
the
from?
50th anniversary
50th?
edition.
Okay,
50th
cool.
anniversary. Yeah. So that was in 2008, which was about 5 years before Ray Harryhausen died. He died in
Oh, nice.
2013. Yeah. He lived to be over 90 years old. He had a long life. And at the end of it, he went to conventions and he could really see how much people appreciated his work.
Oh, good.
And in fact, when I met him at a convention, I had a table with some of the masks and things I made. I told him what everybody else has said to him, which is, your movies really, really inspired me. They meant so much to me. And they put me on this path to making monsters for movies, which is what I wanted to do. And what he said to me was, as I'm sure he said to a lot of people, something like this. He said, well, we're just trying to make a bit of entertainment, but if you can get something more out of it, why, that's wonderful. He comes off as very English, even
Yes.
though he grew up in LA.
Yeah.
Once they moved over to England, he took on the England
So-
way of speaking.
Oh, wow.
Chad, you would have recognized this movie
Yeah.
because we did the Golden Voyage of Sinbad on 70s. Only you missed that episode.
Oh, well, there you go.
I'm like going, oh shit, you just can't.
And I suppose this makes up for it, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah.
just further embarrassment.
Now he can go back and catch that. All right. Well, let's do some feedback here, and we're going to call this the Mikey Z show because we got 3 comments from Mikey Z, and we appreciate it. And where are the rest of you people? I mean, leaving it all for Mikey Z. Let's everybody carry their load here. Chad.
Yeah.
Well, let's have let me see how this goes here. Well, Chad's got one for. All right, Daphne, how about you read one on 143 Diabolique?
Okay. The French. Diabolique has inspired everyone from Hitchcock to Adrian Lyne to M. Night Shyamalan. As mentioned, this is a slow burn but fulfilling psychological gem from Henry Clouzot. There is some memorable imagery in this 1955 French classic in the vein of Gaslight, only on steroids. Great podcast as always. Great to see the return of Whitney.
Aw.
Agreed.
Yay!
Yay.
Love you guys. Can't wait for the next Harryhausen.
Well, here it is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The French, and Adrian
Yes.
Lyne is Fatal
Oh,
Attraction. What's the other one? Jacob's Ladder.
Hmm.
So
I love Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah. All right. Stranger on the Third Floor. That was my pick, so I'm going to go ahead and read that. That's
It's pronounced thrid floor. If you read
Yes. It is. I'm glad you point that out, Chad. The
Good.
Stranger on the Third Floor. For Mike Easy, a film noirish tale that is more nightmare than a linear tale. Fast-paced plots move through a story of a wrongly convicted man to the reporter whose testimony was key to his conviction being charged with the murder of another. That could have been the synopsis. Peter Lorre has mostly a cameo in his white scarf as the true perpetrator of both crimes, as well as others not shown. Margaret Talichet, I went through this before, shines as the fiancée of wrongly accused reporter played by John McGuire. Wonderful cinematography from Nicholas Musaraka with great expressionistic shadows. Wonderful dream sequences predating Hitchcock's Spellbound, but not quite so Freudian here. Great podcast by the Grue-Crew with special co-ghost Dirk Rogers. Next up, French classic Les Diaboliques, a Clouzot-directed gem. Not Inspector Clouseau, but Henri Georges. So not Peter Sellers sightings here. It's going to be classic. Oh, Mikey. love
the
that movie.
Mikey.
And the last one for Chad, which was a movie that he picked.
The Creature Walks Among Us from episode 141. Mikey Z says, Don McGowan does a great job indicating character into a landlocked gillman. More human soap opera than adventure film. Great podcast. Looking forward to a classic in 2023. Thanks, Mike.
Yes,
Nice.
Mikey
so
C.
are we.
He did. That guy did a great job that played the
He
Gilmore
did.
in that.
Mhm.
Not being able to say anything or even,
Mhm.
it was a great job.
Yeah, you could tell, as he was tearing that room apart, he was going, F this, F that, and F that too.
F this couch. F this bed.
Like that video. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for this episode, but every 2 weeks we'll be focusing on a specific film released between 1920 and 1969. Next up is one chosen by Chad. And it's a strange pick for somebody who doesn't like to read during movies.
Well, it's a story
Chad.
dear and close to my heart. We're going to do Faust from 1926, not the Faust from, was it back in the late 80s or early 90s? Brian Usna produced a film called Faust, based on a superhero, not really a superhero, but a comic book of the same name. But this is the silent film Faust. So,
Directed by F.W. Murnau, who gave us Nosferatu.
And the reason that I made it differentiated between those two is so I don't accidentally watch the Brian Usna film.
Well, this has also Emil Jannings. This is the lead on this, so that's. I think wasn't he? He was in Cabinet of the Dr. Caligari, right? Oh, why do I say that stuff without knowing for sure?
You really shouldn't.
I shouldn't. I swear. Well, I'll look it up when I'm editing.
Dialogue from the us here.
I know. I'll look it up when I
The quality you've come to
edit it and
expect.
cut it. What's that?
This is the quality you've come to expect from this podcast.
It is.
All
Half of them
experts,
can't remember to
aren't we?
watch the right movie, and the other ones can't pronounce words.
We're just friends talking about
Yeah.
movies.
That's right. And we did. I'm glad you said something, Chad, because we got sort of chastised by a listener for Valley of Gwangi that our descriptions of stop motion were painful. And I said, well, because we don't know.
Never said I was an expert.
We've never done it.
I love stop motion. I just, I don't know all the ins and outs of it. I know how they do it, but
It's the listener's fault for paying attention to this podcast.
yeah, you should. This is a podcast you should.
For taking
listen
us
to while you're on
seriously,
the
that's
toilet.
Right?
Basically.
if they're gonna be that particular about it, they're just begging for disappointment.
Yeah,
I love the growing list of our taglines for our podcast.
I love the growing list of movies I'm forgetting to watch.
Just to review, there's the high school kids who think they're cool. And then now it's a podcast you listen to on the toilet. How much better? I'm so proud.
I'm so proud.
Honestly, I am. I am so proud. I love this so.
I am proud to be here.
Me too.
This is my favorite podcast out of all the DOH podcasts.
Hey, advertisers, you too could reach this prime demographic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Poopers and Alzheimer's patients.
I was totally wrong. Emil Jannings was in Waxworks.
Waxworks. Emil Jannings.
1924. Oh, you know what? We should end this podcast before I think of something else I don't know.
I've got a list right here. Hold on.
Chad's got the list of stuff I say that he doesn't care about. And I don't know what he does with it because he doesn't care about it. But
just keeping a record.
Anyway, so again, everybody, it seems kind of lame to ask for comments after that ending here. But yeah, leave us comments, subscribe.
Yeah, and keep the syllables down to 2 to 3 syllables per word, please.
Hey, we're just with the exception of Ralph, I would say we're just friends who love movies and like talking about it.
I'm no friend.
We try to look some stuff up. No, Ralph is a very good friend. And just
told you guys.
He knows what he's talking about. we just like the movie and shoot breeze about it. So anyway, Catch us again here in 2 weeks for another great horror movie, the classic era, as only decades of horror can do it. And thank you so much. Seriously, Ralph.
Yeah, Ralph.
for,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Coming
much
on
for
and-
having me. I really appreciate it. This is a film that I love so much, and I also love your podcast so much. So it's a joy to be a part of it.
Anytime you want to come back.
Thanks, Ralph. It's great seeing you. Talking
And
to
anytime you want to argue,
Hearing ya.
Chad, I'm down for it. Let's do it.
No, I'm going to bow out of any further future arguments until I'm pretty sure of what's going on.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm,
Jeff, you better stop us before we say something foolish here.
you.
Say goodnight, everybody.
Good
night,
night, everybody.
Bye.
Gruesome Magazine.